Alright, so this is my review for the movie From Beyond from 1986. And I've had this on my list of movies to watch for quite a while. It's a pretty big cult following to it. And what finally made me actually sit down and watch it was there is a vinyl soundtrack for this movie that just came out by one of the companies that I really like that puts out these soundtracks for a lot of horror films, but also just regular movies. It's called Waxwork Records. They do really good work. All their stuff's really awesome. So they're releasing this soundtrack score, and I just wanted to check it out to see if it was worth maybe investing in that or not. So I finally sat down and watched it, and it's been on my list of things to watch because it's a recollaboration of the writer, director, and star from Reanimator. So that was Reanimator from 1985 is a hugely popular cult film. I really really liked it when I saw it. I think I saw it for the first time a year or two ago. So yeah, it took me a while to get around to it, but I really liked it. It's a good like zombie kind of film, perfect 80s film. So I definitely wanted to watch this. It's Stuart Gordon again as the director, and then Jeffrey Combs is the main star of Reanimator, and he appears in this again. So this time, Combs plays Crawford Tillinghast, and he's again a kind of scientist, but this time he's not doing like medical experiments. He's working with Dr. Pretorius, and they're trying to do this called a resonator, and once it starts working, and they can see different forms of reality and like different universes. And this happens at the very beginning of the movie. They get it to work, and all this start seeing crazy, weird creatures and stuff. So the story is that they see these things at the beginning. Some trouble happens to Dr. Pretorius, and I forgot his name. Crawford goes and he gets arrested. They think he's just some psychopath, so he gets locked up and taken to jail. But then there's a doctor, Dr. Catherine McMichaels, played by Barbara Crampton, is another pretty big name for horror films, especially in the 80s. She kind of believes him. She knows who Dr. Pretorius is. He's supposed to be this kind of genius physicist. And so she's just really interested to actually see what happened. She takes Crawford back to the house with the help of Bubba Brownlee, is played by Ken Faree. He's also pretty well known name from the 80s horror franchises. He was in Dawn of the Dead, one of the Dead movies, and so yeah, he's kind of the supervisor guy. Making sure Crawford doesn't get out of hand, and then Dr. McMichaels wants to really see what this machine can do. And Crawford's pretty hesitant to, repair the machine because everything he says he saw was just horrific, and he doesn't want to do it again. But they eventually convince him to. Well, McMichaels does. She convinces him to repair the machine, and once they turn it on, a bunch of weird, crazy interdimensional stuff starts happening, and the rest of the movie is just like a series of practical effects and pretty craziness that's going on. So I won't get into every single little thing that happens, but overall, I was a little disappointed in the movie. It's not nearly as good as Reanimator. Reanimator is such a good movie. I think that movie's almost perfect. And I don't know what happened with this. The story is just very absent. There's not a lot going on. They're trying to get back with, apparently Dr. Pretorius is kind of like altered dimensions, and he's like this whole other worldly being, and he can be all powerful, and it's like kind of infecting the others in the house, especially Dr. McMichaels. She really wants to see what all of this power can do, but it's just just overall the plot just doesn't really work. It's not very like motivated. It doesn't get going, and it doesn't keep you interested. I really wanted to like it, but unfortunately, it just didn't really work for me. Some of the practical effects are pretty good. They're really good in Reanimator. Here, they're just you can tell it's nice to see practical effects, and you can tell there's a lot of like work that went into them. But overall, just all the designs and stuff just weren't that interesting. They weren't very successful, especially looking back at it now. It's what 30 years later. They're just not very iconic or memorable for sure. So that was kind of disappointing too. I thought maybe well at least if the plot's not that great, um, maybe the effects will be cool. And there's a couple here and there. Okay, there's one cool special effect that with Bubba, he's getting attacked by it's like flies or something. That one's pretty cool. So there's that. That's the one that's probably memorable now. But yeah, other than that, nothing too great. I like Ken Free. He does a decent job. He's not like the best actor in the world, but he's always kind of his delivery and everything's just really good. He just always has a good presence, so he's pretty good in it. Barbara Crampton was okay. I've seen quite a bit of her stuff now, but she's never really memorable for some reason. She was pretty good in Reanimator. Here she's okay. She's not that great. Jeffrey Combs, he's great. Again, he was so good in Reanimator. Here he kind of brings that same kind of energy. I just don't think his role, is not as meaty. It doesn't have as much to it. I don't think the character's as fleshed out, and it just overall doesn't work as well. But he still does a good job with the acting and everything. I always remember Jeffrey Combs from, I think most people would always just instantly think of Reanimator, and I kind of do now. But before then, I always remembered him from The Frighteners. So that was the first time I ever saw him I think Frighteners came out in like 1996. And me and all my brothers, we loved Michael J. Fox after the Back to the Future movies. And so Frighteners was like one of his bigger movies after to us, one of his bigger movies after the Back to the Future movies. And Jeffrey Combs is in it as kind of this paranormal guy that was just a super psycho. And seeing it, thinking of that movie now is pretty interesting because you can tell that that's like a really big get for that was a Peter Jackson movie, and so for him to get this big like cult icon from Reanimator to be in his movie, it makes a lot of sense now. And he's really good in Frighteners. He's so intense and out there. That's what I always think of Frighteners when I think of Jeffrey Combs, but yeah, he does a good job. And anyways, so just for like movies that I thought of with connection to this is like Reanimator. This movie From Beyond is a H.P. Lovecraft story. So instantly I think of other movies that have that kind of feel to it. Event Horizon, I think, is very in line with that. I think that's probably so far that I've seen, one of the better interpretations of like an H.P. Lovecraft story where they're going to different dimensions, and it's done really well in Event Horizon. I like that movie. Otherwise, there's like Hellraiser, very similar feel to that. So Event Horizon's almost like Hellraiser in space. So those two, and then one movie that it doesn't have really to do with H.P. Lovecraft or anything, but that I thought of was another unsuccessful 80s kind of horror film was Life Force. So Life Force is kind of touted as, this cult horror film with these like weird space vampires and crazy practical effects, and it has some things going for it, Life Force, but not very much. That movie gets pretty boring, and this movie, From Beyond, is a much better movie than Life Force in my opinion. But they're both kind of just, I think people have higher opinions of them than they deserve for some reason. They're not that great. Both get kind of boring. And Life Force was much more boring, but for some reason I just kind of remembered that when I was watching this. So yeah, I think that'll be my review. I'm giving it a 2.5 out of 5. So it's not horrible. It's not great. It's pretty much right in the middle. I'm probably going to be watching the rest of the Reanimator films. There's quite a few other follow-ups. There's like Beyond Reanimator, Bride of Reanimator, so I might see those and see how they stack up with this, but definitely watch Reanimator. Is an amazing film that you should see. From Beyond, Stuart Gordon and Jeffrey Combs' follow-up. Not really a necessary watch. If you're really into like practical horror effects from the 80s, it's maybe in the list, but there's so many to choose from as well, so yeah, 2.5 out of 5. It's kind of it's so in the middle. I don't know where, like, how to recommend it. I'd say I would not recommend this movie. I don't think, unless you're like a super diehard horror fan or H.P. Lovecraft fan or something. I'd probably only recommend this for like hardcore fans. So, all right, that'll be it.